Hello race fans, welcome to another video. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe and ring the bell to stay up to date on future uploads. Currently on the road to 1,000 subscribers for the end of the year, so every little bit of your support helps. Today we will be talking about the Xfinity race at Mexico City, NASCAR's first time venturing south of the border since 2008. And for all the stupid comments we heard about some fans on how this was a terrible decision and that NASCAR doesn't need to go global because it's an American sport, it should stay American only, or that Mexico is a crime-riddled country, stay away from it. Joke's on them, because this race was pretty darn good, proving once again that the complaints from that section of the fanbase were baseless and unfounded. No surprise there. Of course, there's still going to be some people that will argue against this race or how the outcome felt rigged, and we will get to that, but they did have a point that this race was a bit of a logistical hellhole to get to, because if you remember, this was right after the Michigan race, and they had to travel thousands of miles south with only 4 to 5 days to prepare in between, only for them to go back and travel thousands of miles back up north to make it to the following race at Pocono. Of course, this was not the case for Xfinity, as last week was an off week for them, so they had quite some time to prepare for this race, but even then some teams were still hit with logistical problems and travel delays on their way to the track, Ryan Ellis being among them. There was also the threat of rain, which we knew ahead of time would be a factor all weekend, and it did play a part as practice for both Cup and Xfinity were condensed, and Cup qualifying was also cut short, but in the grand scheme of things, the race went on without any issues. The story of this race was, of course, Daniel Suarez. SVG was originally scheduled to run this race in the JRM 9 car, but a couple of weeks ago, the team decided to have Suarez run this one instead because it was a home race for him, and him coming from the NASCAR Mexico Series, of course, he has raced here. I don't think this is the first time he has seen this track. He wasn't the only Mexican driver in the grid, of course. Former Mexico Series champion Ruben Robelo was also on the grid, as well as current Truck Series driver Andres Perez, who was making his Xfinity debut in this race. But given the quality of the cars each of them were driving, as well as comparing the body of work of all three guys, it's safe to say all eyes were on Suarez for this race. Everyone looked at him and pegged them as the best shot Mexico had at claiming the win at their home race. Sadly, the weekend didn't start off in the best way for him. Suarez ended up wrecking his primary car in practice after a brake issue sent him head-on into the wall in turn 11, and the team had to unload the backup. It is also worth mentioning that since 39 cars were entered into this race, this would have represented a DNQ for Suarez because that JRM 9 car is a part-time entry this season. But since the open exemption provisional was in place for this race, Suarez would be able to make the race as a 39th starter, but of course he would have to start from last place, and he would also not be credited any points or awarded any prize money after the race. So essentially he was treated as a guest driver for this race. But still, even with the backup car, he looked bad fast all day long, steadily making up ground throughout the race, and he was also one of the best on restarts, owing to the fact that, again, he's raced at this track before plenty of times. He's very familiar with the braking zones. I would say he was either the third or fourth best car of the race in my opinion, depending on how you feel about Christopher Bell. I feel like the 24 was a little bit faster, but unfortunately he ended up blowing the engine towards the end of stage 2. But Connor Silich and Ty Gibbs, they were the class of the field for the first two stages. They started 1-2, and from the moment the green flag dropped, they immediately went to war. Ty Gibbs sent Silich off track on lap 2 to take the lead, and he went on to dominate stage 1, but then Silich came back, got the jump on Ty Gibbs on the restart of stage 2, and he went on cruise control for that stretch. Of course, pit strategy prevented both the 88 and the 19 from actually reaping the benefits of running 1-2 the entire way, with Silich's JRM teammates in Kvapil and Sammy Smith winning both of the stages instead. But it was a fun battle all throughout that didn't just stay confined to the track, but also on pit road, because both times Silich and Gibbs pitted at the end of the stage, they came out right next to each other, and watching them race to the braking zone, trying to outbrake the other to gain that position, that was just absolute cinema right there. But unfortunately, it would also lead to the moment that really changed everything, because on the stage 3 restart, Gibbs got a really great launch after a great push from Suarez behind him, and he and the 9 had Silic beat entering turn 1, but the 88, not wanting to give up the position, he sent it deep into turn 1, but he ended up wheel hopping, making contact with Ty Gibbs and spinning out. The 19 got a flat tire out of this ordeal, and he ended up collecting Kvapil after losing control of his car on turn 3. And from there, several other cars piled in as well as they were scrambling to make it through that set of corners. Parker Retzlaff and Ruben Robelo with heavy damage. Retzlaff, I believe, he even dropped out of the race. While Kyle Sieg, Ryan Sieg, Sammy Smith, and Sam Mayer all got a piece of it as well. For Mayer, this was also his second incident of the day after bringing out the first caution on lap 2 by wheel hopping turn 11, spinning and hitting the wall on his driver's side fairly hard. The same spot where Suarez suffered his practice crash. I really doubt that would be the end of the race for him because the damage looked pretty ugly, but the team managed to not only get him back on the track and on the lead lap, but he was able to race his way back to the top 15 before getting involved in the aforementioned Silic incident that took him out once again and relegating him to 23rd at the end. So after the dust settled and with Silic and Gibbs out of contention, this left Suarez in the lead, with his only competition for those last 20 laps being Taylor Gray. And while the 54 looked like the better car in the long run, in part because it wasn't as beat up as the 9 was, Suarez had the experience on his side, and he was able to pull away to almost a 3-second lead over second place. Of course, the 54 started reeling him in, cutting the lead down to 1.5, 1.6 seconds before another caution for a Jesse Love spin set up what would be a 4-lap shootout for the win, opening the door not only for Taylor Gray, but for Silic as well, as he had worked his way back into the top 10 after restarting 25th. But despite the setback and having the field bunched up again, Suarez still managed to hold them all off. I thought he got lost the race after I saw the 54 forcing him off the track into the grass and causing him to lose all of his momentum on corner exit, but credit to Taylor Gray for driving Suarez the way he did. He was in position to use him up and win the race a couple times, but as he said in his post-race interview, he decided to take the high road instead and try to win the right way. And mind you, this is coming from a guy that's had a couple wins taken away from him due to other drivers running him over. So the fact that even after all that, he's still willing to race people clean and win the right way, I tip my hat off to him. If there's anyone who hasn't won a race but deserves to win this season, Taylor's gonna be near the top of that list. And good thing too, because considering how some Mexican fans are, I don't know how Taylor Gray makes it back to the US if he did something to Suarez and took him out in those last couple of laps. So good thing he raced him clean right there. But yeah, he didn't rough him up. He came pretty close on the last lap, putting the bumper on the last set of corners on the final lap, but he just couldn't get it done. And just like that, Daniel Suarez from last to first on a backup car wins at his home track. Okay, I wouldn't say home track because he's actually from Monterrey and this track is located in Mexico City, but he won at his home country, so it kind of counts, okay? This is, without a doubt, one of my favorite wins and moments of the season so far, and it will be. I don't think there will be that many moments for now until the end of the season that will top this one, but even if there are, this one will stay near the top for sure. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a Suarez fan. Even if you're not a fan of his, you can't help but feel happy for an international driver winning an international race in front of his home crowd. This is as close as we will get to that Formula One moment when it comes to international drivers winning at their home country. I also really loved how Adam Alexander and the CW booth, they just stayed silent as Suarez made his burnout in the stadium section of the track and the fans were going crazy. It was electric. Probably the loudest I have seen a NASCAR crowd go in a long time. And I'm pretty sure most of those people from the stands, they were not NASCAR fans, but they attended the race either because they had a season pass or because they wanted to see Daniel Suarez race. And I bet most of those fans fell in love with the sport that day. You couldn't have asked for a better race than this to justify NASCAR's expansion into a global sport. Because, yes, even if it is an American sport, NASCAR also deserves to go global, if they want to. As a matter of fact, with exhibition races in Japan and Australia dating all the way back to the 1980s, and of course the Xfinity racing in Mexico and Canada back in the mid to late 2000s. Also, Toyota is in the sport. That's a Japanese manufacturer. We got international drivers as well, like Suarez and SVG. And with the open exemption provisional, that allows for high-profile international drivers to attempt crown jewel events like the Daytona 500. You could argue NASCAR has already gone global, and I hope they keep on going that route, as this will no doubt bring new fans from different parts of the world their way. Of course, there's some people out there that will argue this is all BS, that NASCAR was made in the US and they should stay in the US. That is, only American manufacturers should compete, only American-born drivers should compete at tracks located on US soil. I don't need to elaborate on how full of bullshit that argument is. Oh, but it doesn't end there. There's even a conspiracy theory going around that NASCAR went to Mexico in order to give Daniel Suarez a free win, and that it was rigged for him to win all along, and that the whole provisional thing was just to guarantee he would make the race, and that he should have been penalized on the final restart for going through the grass and cutting the corner because he wasn't really forced off the track by the 54. Look, if it was really rigged, and what those people said is true, don't you think NASCAR would have kept the race green instead of throwing that final caution for Jesse Love? Because Suarez had a fairly big lead before that yellow came out, and when he did, everyone was like, oh man, that Suarez got screwed. But now that he won, the narrative shifts to it was rigged all along for him. Why is that? Is it because he went through the grass on one of the corners on that final restart? That can't be, because like I said, he was forced. And shout out to NASCAR, because this is another thing that really caught my attention. They were pretty consistent with enforcing their track limits all race long. I don't think there was a single track limits related penalty where I had to do a double take to make sure they got it right. We saw Ty Gibbs force Connor Silich off the track early on lap 2, no penalty. And Jesse Love, about a lap before he spun out, he was forced off by Sammy Smith and he went through the grass too. Again, no penalty. And I didn't see anyone opening their mouth about that, but because Suarez wasn't penalized, it's rigged? You know, I'll stop right there because those people are beyond help. They're probably the type of sports fan who thinks there's a conspiracy theory behind every single emotional or inspirational sports moment. They're just that insufferable. But yeah, great win by Suarez. Without a doubt, my favorite win of his entire NASCAR career. Yes, even better than his Atlanta win from last year, which is saying a lot. I really doubt he'll sweep the weekend because there's way more competition in the Cup Series, and he will probably need to get his strategy right and get lucky with a couple cautions to even have a chance. And yes, I do think there will be a bunch of those in the Cup race, and not just crash-related, but also mechanical. We had our fair share of mechanical failures in this Xfinity race, and I have no doubt it was because of the high altitude of this track. I briefly mentioned Ruben Robelo and how he was involved in that massive wreck at the start of Stage 3. He also had a track bar issue at the end of Stage 1 that put him several laps down. Justin Allgaier, he also suffered a transmission failure early on. The first blemish in what had otherwise been a perfect season for the number 7 team so far. I briefly mentioned Christopher Bell. He had an engine failure late in Stage 2 that surprisingly enough didn't bring a caution, although that probably was because NASCAR figured he was at a safe place on the entrance to pit road. They didn't need to put it out and they were close to the end of the stage anyways, but regardless, that still contributed to the stage break being longer than usual, which has been a recurring issue on road courses as of late, and this race was no exception. But at least this time it was understandable because pit road was closed and a car was stopped outside of its stall with a blow motor, so they had to do some cleanup, which contributed to the stage break being as long as it was. But yeah, you get the point. I don't think Suarez wins on Sunday as much as I want him to. But even if that didn't happen, us Suarez fans wouldn't care that much. With this Mexico Xfinity win, we already got what we wanted and more. But if Lady Luck smiles down upon him one more time, you never know. He could end up capping off what could potentially be one of, if not the most electric weekend in NASCAR history. And at that point, y'all probably wouldn't hear anything from me because I would just spontaneously combust. So let's see if that does or doesn't happen.